December 30th, 2011. Brock Lesnar, the UFC's most dominant heavyweight, crumples to the canvas from a liver kick. Standing over him is Alistair Overeem, but this isn't the same Ubereem who started his career. This version is a 265-pound knockout machine with muscles that seemed impossible. They called him Ubereem, and his transformation would become one of MMA's most controversial scientific experiments. Before we dive into Overeem's jaw-dropping transformation, let's rewind to where it all began. Alistair Overeem was born in Amsterdam in the Netherlands in 1980. Growing up, he wasn't immediately drawn to combat sports. Like many kids, he dabbled in sports and activities, but it wasn't until his brother, Valentin Overeem, introduced him to kickboxing and MMA that Alistair found his calling. Overeem's early fights were a mix of highs and lows. He turned professional in 1999, just shy of his 19th birthday. At the time, he fought in smaller European promotions before getting his big break in Pride FC, Japan's iconic MMA organization. Pride was a proving ground for legends, and Overeem quickly earned a reputation as a skilled striker. In Pride, Overeem fought in the light heavyweight division, a stacked weight class filled with killers like Vanderlei Silva, Rampage Jackson, and Shogun Rua. While Overeem had crisp striking and a dangerous guillotine choke, his slender build often left him out-muscled by opponents. One of his most notable early fights was against Vitor Belfort, a lightning-fast Brazilian striker. Overeem managed to secure a guillotine choke victory, showing his ability to compete at the top level. But he also had some tough losses. In his fight against Chuck Liddell, Overeem was physically overwhelmed, tossed around, and eventually finished. At this point, Overeem was good, but not great. He had the skills to compete, but lacked the size and strength to dominate. After years of fighting as a light heavyweight, Overeem realized that cutting weight was draining him. He wasn't maximizing his potential. He needed a change. A big one. And that is when the transformation began. Moving to heavyweight was a game changer for Overeem. No longer restricted by weight cuts, he allowed his body to grow naturally. Or so we thought at the time. What followed was one of the most dramatic transformations in MMA history. When Overeem started fighting at heavyweight, he didn't just gain weight, he became a completely different human being. His traps grew like mountains, his biceps bulged, and his chest filled out to proportions that seemed almost comical. In a matter of years, he went from looking like a long-distance runner to resembling a bodybuilder. Fans were quick to notice the change. Overeem didn't just gain muscle, he gained power. His punches carried more weight, his kicks were more devastating, and his clinch game became a nightmare for opponents. Fighters who once might have overpowered him suddenly found themselves being tossed around like ragdolls. Overeem attributed much of his transformation to his infamous horsemeat diet. According to him, horsemeat was a staple in his nutrition plan, providing him with the protein needed to build muscle. Now, while horsemeat is a legitimate source of lean protein, fans were not buying it.
He was like the bony 205er.
Yeah, he was thin.
Yeah, he was thin. Then one day I saw him like, God damn, what the fuck you doing? He said, horsemeat.
What are you making?
Beef. I like beef. Beef makes you strong. Cow beef, horse beef. I eat like 6, 7, 8 times a day.
So if you eat like 6 or 7 times a day, you'll get big.
You get big. No doubt.
No bottom to your stomach.
Fast. Fast metabolism. No fat. Fast.
The horsemeat explanation quickly became a running joke in the MMA community. Memes flooded the internet, and fans speculated about what else might be in his diet. Behind the transformation was Overeem's relentless training regimen. Training at a Golden Glory, a legendary Dutch gym, Overeem honed his kickboxing skills while building his new physique. His sessions were brutal. Overeem would spar with elite kickboxers, flip tractor tires, and sprint through sand dunes. Every aspect of his training was designed to turn him into a heavyweight wrecking machine. As Overeem's body transformed, so did his reputation. Fans were in awe of the new and improved Overeem. He earned the nickname Ubereem, who is now almost a mythical fighter in MMA folklore.
before USADA came around, when Alistair was on all the Mexican supplements. That was a fully juiced Reem. The fully juiced Reem was the scariest heavyweight that ever existed. Look at that mother. God
His eyebrows
damn,
got
dude.
muscles.
I think Alistair Overeem, when he was like allowed to supplement with whatever the you could do, because he was a world-class kickboxer, K-1 Grand Prix champion. The type of stand-up skills that he had, man.
Brock nervous.
Of course he's nervous, because he's got to try to take this dude down, and the dude's as big as him.
But with admiration came suspicion. The whispers about PEDs began early. How could someone gain that much muscle in such a short amount of time? Overeem denied the accusations, sticking to his Horsemeat story, but the questions never went away. By 2010, Overeem had fully embraced his role as a heavyweight, and he wasn't just competing, he was obliterating everyone in his path. One of Overeem's crowning achievements came in 2010 when he entered the K-1 World Grand Prix, the most prestigious kickboxing tournament in the world. Competing against the best strikers on the planet, Ubereem proved that he wasn't just a big guy with heavy hands, he was a masterful technician. In the finals, he faced Peter Aerts, a K-1 legend. Overeem's size and power were too much for him to handle. He finished the fight with devastating knees and punches, cementing his place in kickboxing history. Winning the K-1 Grand Prix was a massive statement. Overeem wasn't just a great MMA striker, he was one of the best pure strikers in the world. At the same time, Overeem was dominating in MMA. He held the Strikeforce heavyweight title and the Dream heavyweight title, making him one of the most decorated fighters in combat sport. Overeem's performances were nothing short of terrifying. His body kick sounded like gunshots, and his knees from the clinch could end a fight in seconds. Fighters like Brett Rogers and Todd Duffy were dispatched with ease, adding to the legend of Ubereem. Then came Overeem's UFC debut in 2011 against Brock Lesnar. This was a perfect exhibition of Ubereem to the wider UFC fans. Lesnar, a former heavyweight champion and WWE star, was a massive draw, but against Overeem, Lesnar looked human.
You want to see how good Alistair Overeem is? Pull up Alistair Overeem versus Brock Lesnar. This was back when they were doing a smell test back then for steroids. That's all they did. Everybody passed. It's so ridiculous. When you look at Brock Lesnar and he's standing right next to, like, how the fuck did he pass anything? They used to call him Ubereem back then. He was like a comic book superhero. His physique was perfect, and his kickboxing skills, world class, dude. When they didn't test, or when they tested very lightly, Alistair was running the show.
Overeem dismantled Lesnar with body shots and finished him with a kick to the body that left Lesnar crumpled on the canvas. It was a statement win that solidified Overeem's status as a top heavyweight. At this point, Overeem was at the peak of his powers. But as we will see, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. At the peak of his dominance, Alistair Overeem was scheduled to fight Junior Dos Santos for the UFC heavyweight title in 2012. It was the ultimate test. Dos Santos was the division's reigning king, known for his boxing and knockout power. Fans couldn't wait. This was going to be the clash of two elite strikers at their absolute best. But the fight never happened. Why? Because Overeem's meteoric rise hit a brick wall in the form of a failed drug test. Ahead of the fight, Overeem was subjected to a random drug test by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. When the results came back, they were nothing short of shocking. Overeem's testosterone to epitestosterone, the TE ratio, was a mind-boggling 14-1. Now, to put that into perspective, the normal ratio for most men is around 1-1. Anything above 4-1 is considered suspicious. Overeem's levels weren't just suspicious, they were off the charts. This bombshell threw the entire fight into chaos. The Nevada State Athletic Commission immediately suspended Overeem, pulling him from the title bout and leaving the UFC scrambling to find a replacement opponent for Dos Santos. Now, the MMA community exploded with reaction. Fans felt vindicated. After years of speculating about Overeem's transformation, they finally had proof that something wasn't adding up. Overeem appeared before the Nevada State Athletic Commission to explain himself. His defense? He claimed he had received an injection from his doctor to treat an injury and he wasn't aware that it contained testosterone. but the damage was already done. The NSAC wasn't buying the excuse, and Overeem was suspended for 9 months. This suspension was a turning point. Overeem, who had been riding high as the most terrifying heavyweight on the planet, was suddenly the subject of ridicule. The Horsemeat jokes intensified, with fans now sarcastically referring to it as testosterone-infused horsemeat. The nickname Ubereem slowly started becoming a punchline. The failed test wasn't just a blow to Overeem's career, it was a blow to his credibility. Media outlets ran with the story, dissecting every aspect of his transformation. Before and after pictures of Overeem circulated online, comparing his skinny Pride days to his monstrous heavyweight physique. The narrative shifted. Overeem was no longer seen as a dominant athlete, he was now seen as a product of PEDs. Fans were divided. Some defended Overeem, arguing that PEDs were rampant in MMA during that era and that he was simply a product of the system. Others condemned him, saying he had cheated his way to the top. The failed test cast a shadow over all of Overeem's achievements, from his K-1 Grand Prix victory to his Strikeforce title reign. Amid the controversy, Overeem also parted ways with Golden Glory, the gym that had been his home for years. The split was bitter, with disputes over contracts and management. This marked another significant shift in Overeem's career. Without Golden Glory, he lost the structure and team that had been instrumental in his rise. When Overeem's suspension ended, fans were eager to see how he would perform. But when he returned to the cage, something was noticeably different. His physique wasn't as hulking as it had been during the Ubereem era. He looked leaner, less imposing. And in the fight game, perception matters. The aura of invincibility that had surrounded Overeem was gone. Post-suspension, Overeem's career entered a turbulent phase. The heavyweight division is notoriously unforgiving, and for Overeem, the cracks began to show. In 2013, Overeem faced Antonio Bigfoot Silva. For the first 2 rounds, he looked like the old Ubereem, dominating Bigfoot with powerful strikes and controlling the fight. But in the 3rd round, disaster struck. Bigfoot landed a series of devastating punches, knocking Overeem out cold. The image of Overeem lying on the canvas unconscious became a symbol of his fall from grace. Later that same year, Overeem faced Travis Brown. Once again, he started strong, nearly finishing Brown with body shots and knees. But Brown weathered the storm and landed a front kick to Overeem's face, followed by ground and pound to secure the win. It was another brutal knockout loss, and fans began to question whether Overeem's chin could hold up in the heavyweight division. Realizing that his durability was now a liability, Overeem adapted his fighting style. He became more cautious, focusing on strategy and technique rather than brute force. He started using more movement, picking his shots carefully and avoiding brawls. While this approach led to some victories, it also made him less exciting to watch. Fans missed the aggressive, fearsome Ubereem. Despite the setbacks, Overeem remained a top contender. He scored impressive wins over fighters like Junior Dos Santos, Mark Hunt, and Fabricio Verdum. These victories showcased his fight IQ and ability to evolve. But the knockout losses continued to haunt him. In 2017, Francis Ngannou landed one of the most vicious uppercuts in MMA history, sending Overeem's head snapping back in a way that made highlight reels for years.
This is the moment where Ngannou arrived. And people realized, like, holy shit, like, this guy is for real. He didn't just do that to any guy. He did that to Alistair motherfucking Overeem.
Yeah, K-1 kickboxing world champion.
Yeah, Strikeforce world champion. Yeah. Just a stud, like, elite fighter.
Even in defeat, Overeem continued to push forward, fighting younger, hungrier opponents. He wasn't the dominant force he once was, but he was still a respected veteran who could give anyone a tough fight. But if there's one thing that you can't take away from Overeem, it's his resilience. Despite the setbacks, he refused to give up. In the later stages of his career, he reinvented himself once more, adopting a more cautious, grappling heavy style that played to his strengths while minimizing his vulnerabilities. While he never recaptured the dominance of his Ubereem days, he proved that he was still a force to be reckoned with. Behind the scenes, the decline took a toll on Overeem. In interviews, he spoke about the challenges of staying motivated in a sport that is as brutal as MMA. For a fighter who had once been at the top of the world, adjusting to life as a gatekeeper wasn't easy. Yet through it all, Overeem remained a professional. He showed up, put in the work, and treated every fight like it was his last. Alistair Overeem's career is a testament to longevity in a sport that rarely allows it. Spanning more than 2 decades, he fought in almost every major organization. Pride, Strikeforce, K-1, Dream, UFC, you name it. Each chapter of his career tells a unique story, from the lanky kickboxer in Pride to the monstrous Ubereem who terrorized the heavyweight division to the seasoned veteran in his twilight years. Think about it. How many fighters can say they've won championships in multiple disciplines while competing at the highest level for over 20 years? Despite the big asterisk next to his resume, he is still considered a pioneer who helped shape the sport of MMA. Of course, with a career as polarizing as Overeem's, there will always be the what-ifs. What if he hadn't failed that drug test? Could he have been UFC heavyweight champion? What if he had stayed at light heavyweight instead of bulking up? Could his technical skill have been enough to overcome the power of bigger fighters? These questions will always linger, and they're a part of what makes Overeem's story so compelling. He was a fighter who constantly evolved, for better or worse, and his career is a reflection of the highs and lows that come with chasing greatness. Overeem's legacy is as polarizing as it is legendary. Some fans will always see him as a PED abuser whose success was tainted by science. Others will remember him as one of the most skilled and dynamic heavyweights to ever step into the cage. And then there are those who appreciate him for what he was. A flawed but fascinating fighter who gave us some of the most memorable moments in MMA history. Whether it was his devastating knees, his K-1 title run, or his knockout losses, Ubereem always left fans with something to talk about. Every fighter faces the moment when they must decide to hang up the gloves, and for Ubereem, that moment came after a lifetime in combat sports. By the time he retired, he had fought nearly 70 professional MMA bouts, not to mention his extensive kickboxing career.
As Dana once said, it's a young man's sport. Even though I still love the sports, I love training, I love everything about it, I also have to be realistic, and my time is coming to an end.
For Overeem, the decision wasn't just about his body, it was about his legacy. He knew that continuing to fight might tarnish the image he had spent decades building.
Totally changed up my diet, I became vegetarian also. I have no desire to eat meat anymore. It's just a choice. But it's by choice. Once you understand why, right? And I'm here to kind of bring this information to the world. Meat is not good for you. It negatively affects you. Yes, it tastes delicious. Even now, if I could still eat meat, but I just choose not to.
In interviews, Overeem reflected on his journey with a sense of gratitude. He acknowledged the mistakes he made, the highs and lows, and the lessons he learned along the way. Alistair Overeem's journey is as complex as it is captivating. He was a striking savant, a physical specimen, a champion, and a controversial figure. His rise, fall, and reinvention are a reminder of how unpredictable and brutal the fight game can be. For some, Overeem will always be the scary Ubereem who obliterated Brock Lesnar. For others, he'll be the guy who failed a drug test and never quite reached his full potential. But no matter where you stand, one thing is undeniable. Overeem's story is one of the most unforgettable in MMA history. What do you think? Legend, cheater, or something in between?